What's up, guys, and welcome to another episode of the NeoVintage podcast. I'm Jabrell, and I'm with
Steve.
And for y'all who haven't watched the show before, we are just two guys that like to talk over the biggest stories in gaming. So, like always, we're going to start with what we've been playing. Steve, what have you been playing?
So, besides the big two, which is obviously Doom Eternal and Animal Crossing, which we pretty much dived into last week. Don't really have much else to say. They're great games. Love playing them. Besides that, I've been playing Twin Breaker, a Sacred Symbols adventure on Vita and PS4. And it's fun. It's, basically it is just enhanced Arkanoid, I guess. Kind of a story-based brick breaker game. And I'm having fun. The story it's short. I beat it pretty quickly in the first day because it's 40 stages. And I'm kind of just going back now, cleaning up, getting some trophies. I don't know if I can do the Platinum because there is one where you have to use, how the two ships are called Greetings and Salutations?
Yes.
There's one trophy where you have to break the exact same amount of bricks with
that's
both.
That's impossible. How do you even do that?
Exactly. So besides that, it's a good game. Again, it was a cheap game. I think it was like $10. And my only gripes with it are the same gripes I have with every brick breaker. Sometimes the ball or whatever they call it the bouncer in this one. It just won't go the direction you think it should. Like, you angle it perfect and the ball goes wherever it feels like it's going. So it's not a exclusive ding against this game. That's just the style of brick breaker games. So besides that, again, small little game. Obviously, Limbo games. We covered it, I think, earlier in the episode. We gave it a shout out, and it's good. I like the soundtrack. I like the style of it. It's cool seeing Colin and Chris in their little 8-bit forms. It's a little wild and it's a little surreal for a second. I can only imagine how they feel looking at themselves in a game. But I've just been playing that pretty much. Not too much else. What have you been playing?
Yeah, so a lot of the similar stuff. So, of course, Animal Crossing and Doom. I got Twin Breaker also the day it released, and I'm really, really enjoying it. I was dying laughing the moment it began because, again, we've been consuming, Colin Moriarty content through, the IGN kind of funny days and now into Colin's Last Stand. So we're very familiar with his style and his work. And all that lore set up at the beginning, where you have, 8-bit cutscenes, I was dying laughing because I was like, only he would put this level of lore into a brick breaker game. We're talking about centuries of setup for a brick breaker game, and I love that. I think that's amazing. The game itself is really fun. If you would have asked me if I would have liked a game like this a couple months back, I would have said definitively no. I'm not really into Arkanoid. I'm not really into brick breakers. It's just not my style of game. But there's something about this one that I've kind of, maybe because the brick breaking in and of itself has the weight of that story behind it, it keeps me invested in it, and I kind of value the challenge because every enemy, every setup, every environmental touch that they put in holds narrative value in a way that Arkanoid's not really set up that way. It's not like a lot of these puzzle games have these deep stories, so this one kind of sets it apart in that regard and keeps my attention. So I'm really enjoying that, and then I've kind of got into a rhythm that it's if I'm not playing Animal Crossing and that's my chill morning and night ritual, I usually switch from that into Doom Eternal, and then once I play that, I've gone back and forth between Witcher and Yakuza, and just I get this weird rhythm I've going on, just I'm in all these massive worlds at the same time, and I've been playing these games for a couple weeks because they're so long. The Witcher Yakuza combo is a terrible idea. I don't know why I'm doing it. None of them are looking like they're ending anytime soon. Yakuza, maybe I'll have another 10 hours before I wrap through, and I love it, but I don't know why I took on all this at the same time.
Yeah, no, that reminds me, the only other thing I've been playing and checking out, because again, I'm putting Witcher on pause because I don't have time for that, and then Yakuza I'm not even starting yet until I have a drier period to play, which probably will never come. I started playing Bleeding's Edge, Microsoft and Ninja Theory's Hero Brawler, I guess. I don't really know what to even call it.
Yeah, I played the beta a couple weeks back.
Yeah, so it went to full launch, I guess. Downloaded it on Game Pass because I wasn't sure about it yet. And it's interesting. I do like it, but man, there's no content there. There's, I know there's the 3 game modes, but they're all kind of the same mode. And I don't know, the heroes don't really have that standout aspect. I don't know. I don't know what I really expect. I didn't really know anything much besides the little you told me about it. But the combat is solid, the controls are solid, but again, it just suffers from this emptiness where it's I did 2 matches last night. after I did the tutorial, and I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. Then I did 2 matches, and I was like, those felt exactly the same. And I know the stages don't have like much variety. I know this is probably more of these live service kind of games. I just don't think it has the legs to stand on, especially with no sort of story mode and very little lore besides like character bios. It just kind of feels flat. And I know this is a weird, entry for Ninja Theory, and this is their first game, right? Since the acquisition.
Yeah, pretty much.
So, I don't know. It doesn't feel like a Ninja Theory game. I'm not really sure. Again, I know it's their B team who's really doing it, and everyone else is kind of working on Senua. So, but I might jump back in again. I just think it's a little too late. I'm glad it's not a battle royale. I mean, I was happy, but it just feels like it's trying to be Overwatch, and even Overwatch can't be Overwatch anymore. So, it's in a weird spot. Besides that, I've been having okay fun with it.
Yeah, I mean, I played that a couple weeks back in the beta. So yeah, I was playing at the time an incomplete product. I don't know if they've dropped more content since then. I haven't jumped into it. Those kind of like hero-based MOBA type games, it's not really my cup of tea, really. Mm-hmm. I saw a lot of potential there. When you get these kind of like online hero-based like content drop type games, yeah, they tend to be a little bit dry at launch. They don't come out of the gate unless you have like a massive conglomerate behind you, like Overwatch had it set up. But I couldn't get the feeling out of me when I was playing it that it gave me a lot of like Battleborn vibes back in the day, where it's kind of like Overwatch, but not quite that level of sheen and polish. And I just feel like we've seen this before. We've seen people come for Overwatch. And I feel like they just have that kind of massive fan base. It's kind of like going for League at this point. Like the juggernauts are kind of established, and it's going to be hard for anybody to break in. Yeah. And it's kind of like in the battle royale industry where you got like the Fortnites, people still playing PUBG, and the only people who can really break in are like massive companies like Activision with Call of Duty and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Because if you're not on that level, there's just no way you can compete with that. The speed of the output, the polish, the stability of the servers, there's just no way you can compete. So when you're jumping into a game where you're going against Overwatch, which I believe is Blizzard, right?
Yes.
You need that level of investment like Blizzard has to compete. And I don't know if they have the full might of Microsoft behind them now that they've been bought up. That's a possibility. And if that's the case and Microsoft's super behind it, then I could see it working because they have the financials to support it. But it's one of those things, like, I'll believe it when I see it. In those industries, fans are so fickle. Things rise up and fall at the drop of a dime. So we'll see how it works out. And I mean, I hope it does really well because, again, competition breeds excellence. And the more good players we have in that industry, the better the industry becomes. So I'm down to see where it goes.
Yeah, again, so far, it's just more of a missed opportunity, not adding a story mode and all this other lore, because you gotta get attached to the characters. At least Overwatch, even though they make you read a bunch of old comic books and YouTube videos to see it, at least the lore is there. So we'll see how. I think Ninja Theory has it in them to pull it out, and especially now with the backing. But we'll see how it is, and I'll keep you guys updated if there's a revamped version, or if I even stay on, if they give me a reason to.
Yeah, keep us posted.
Yeah. Alright, so we'll move into the first story, which is kind of broke overnight, I guess in the morning as of recording this. So Square Enix has confirmed it is bringing an upgraded version of Nier Replicant to PC, PlayStation 4, and Xbox One. It's the remake of the decade-old action RPG, and they did it for the game's 10th anniversary. Now, which was weird is that, not weird really, but Platinum Games is not involved with it, and which is not, I guess, not that biggest deal because it is just kind of a port and remaster, I guess, because they haven't been too specific. There's a small trailer, and you had to lighten me up because I was confused what Nier Replicant was. I thought it was a sequel for a second, and I completely forgot that I knew there was the other Nier game on PS3 and 360, but I forgot about the other one that we never got over here in America. So does this interest you at all?
Yeah, it actually does, because I wasn't the biggest fan of the original Nier, but I had heard nothing but praise for the kind of Japanese rollout of it and the other game we never got. So to give a little bit of a kind of background, because a lot of people don't really understand what this is a remake of a game that we never got in the States. Now, back in, I believe, 2010, two games came out under the Nier kind of franchise. It was Nier Gestalt, which was a Xbox 360 game, and then you got Nier Replicant on the PS3. Now, when they decided to bring it to the United States and localize it, they only brought Nier Gestalt over. And that was released in PS3 here. And that's the one with that kind of like grizzled older man that everybody knows as like the all capital letters Nier that came out in America. Nier Replicant, the other one that has like a female protagonist, never came to the States. It was never localized. The reason for that, I'm not exactly sure. So finally, that's what we're getting. So it's not a sequel, but they're kind of upgrading the original Nier Replicant, which was the PS3 game at the time, and bringing it to modern consoles. So it's going to be a brand new experience for a vast amount of, you know, Americans and Europeans who never got that game. So it's pretty exciting. I'm willing to give it a shot because I really enjoyed Automata. I don't know like if this is a narrative prequel or sequel, or I don't know anything about the narrative of it, but I'm curious to see if it's aged well, if they cleaned it up nice, if there's interesting lore to be had there. I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting they went this direction. I guess that they want to fill out the franchise because Nier Automata is constantly brought up in like award shows, and it was so popular for a while. And yeah, I wonder where it fits timeline wise, because Nier Automata it's loosely a sequel based on like the fourth ending of Nier with the older gentleman. And I remember playing that game back when it came out, and I really did enjoy it. Like, the mechanics are really wonky and stuff like that. Nier Automata, I'm playing again slowly, and it's a little bit more polished and stuff like that. So I wonder if this is prior to the other Nier, or is it in between, or alternate? Because the game plays with alternate timelines and universes and stuff. But I mean, I guess more Nier for the fans who've been kind of dying for it. 'Cause for a while, we've been waiting for an announcement of a sequel, so it's there for...
I wonder if this is going to get a full $60 release, or is this going to be more of like a discount 40, since this is kind of an upgrade of an older game. They can treat it either way, because again, there's no version of Nier Replicant that's ever come to the States. So if they want to do a full $60 release and treat it like a brand new game, they could get away with it, honestly.
Yeah, I think so. And I think the fan base is there for it too. I mean, they want more Nier. People have been asking for it, so bring back, here's a brand new experience that you may not have heard of that can maybe tie into what you already love. I mean, yeah, I can see it going either way, 60 or 40, depending on how much they really put into it.
Yeah, the story of Nier is so kind of like vague and peculiar that like I don't think it actually matters that much whether it's like a prequel or a sequel, because so much of the lore is like detached, and you get these small little excerpts from small characters here and there as you explore the world, and you get flashbacks and flash forwards and did this happen and did this not happen, and it kind of goes into that like Final Fantasy 15 Kingdom Hearts 3 where you kind of got to separate your mind while you play it and just experience it in the present, because if you try to tie everything together, you're going to get lost in the sauce like immediately. So
yeah, and so much is open to interpretation and like metaphors and stuff too, so I guess it doesn't really matter that much.
Okay, so the second story we have is something that broke, I think this Thursday or something like that, where it was a new Epic Games partnership. So apparently Epic Games is announcing new multi-platform publishing effort with a developer-first approach. This is going to be with Gen Design, who's known for The Last Guardian, Playdead, which is Inside and Limbo, and Remedy Entertainment, which most new is known for Control. And they're the first partners to announce relationships with Epic Games Publishing. Now, this is the other side, I believe, of a story that broke a little bit earlier, which is that Remedy was going to work with a big publishing partner. Now we know it seems to be Epic Games. What do you think about this?
I mean, I know some people jumped at the issue that it was bad, and they want Epic Games to burn and stuff. But you got to realize, as a developer, when you're making a product, you kind of do want to. People use the word sellout as a bad thing. You want to sell out. You want a company to give you money to be able to follow your passion. So if this means we get better and more games from these three companies, these are all companies that for the longest time people have been rumored. Sony's been rumored to buy them, and Microsoft's been rumored to buy them, and they're all except I know The Last Guardian was kind of lukewarm for what it was, but Control was pretty well received. People love Inside and Limbo, so the fact that somebody hasn't bought that studio, that was a missed opportunity. So I'm glad they're getting their funding somewhere. And I know people don't want complain that Epic Games is annoying to try to get the games on at least against Steam and stuff like that. But it doesn't mean that they're exclusive. But in the same way that Borderlands was an exclusive on Epic, and that came to Steam not too long ago, and it came to PlayStation, and it came to Xbox. So don't worry about being locked out your system. Just look at the fact that, it is a relationship, and it just means more publishing effort and more money goes towards these companies so they can do what they need to do without cutting corners.
And I guess people's apprehension is when these smaller developers link up with these massive conglomerations, there'll possibly be like a loss of creative control, I'm assuming, is what some people are afraid of. But I think the natures of the teams is what kind of like assuages my fears. Like, if you're looking for teams to like dominate and control and spit out a certain type of game to market to a certain type of people, I don't think you go to like a team like Playdead with their style games. I think I think Epic's willing to throw the money behind teams and let them do what they want to do. These are people with hits. I mean, Remedy with Control, well liked. Playdead, Inside, and Limbo. That's some people's favorite games of all time.
Yeah.
Now, Last Guardian, but I mean, it has its fan base for sure. So again, these are very peculiar teams to link up with, which tells me that Epic is probably going to have a more hands-off approach and kind of just play the back-end finance and maybe pick up a little bit of royalties on the back end and just give these guys the extra push they need. But I doubt it's going to extend anything beyond that, because again, if you're going to pick up a team to pump out money like EA style acquisition, these are not the teams you go to. So this tells me that they're just probably trying to make a little bit of money off the indie scene, if I have to guess.
Yeah, it's just, I don't think people have anything to worry about. Like, Control's gonna make, not Control, Remedy's gonna make whatever they had on their docket next. Now, just, there's gonna be some exclusivity to Epic and maybe like early access to Epic, but Playdead for sure. Again, I can't speak too much for design and The Last Guardian, but Playdead for sure, their games are not. They're gonna just tell them to make the next game they were gonna make, because Inside and Limbo were just so critically hit. Like you said, so many people's game of the year and game of all time. You would be nuts to try to put a shackle on that. It was like, if you look back at like when Sony when Sony signed a contract with Kojima, that's like if Sony was like, no, well, you have to make a Metal Gear game. You're not going to try to put a restriction on someone who already has such a big fan base and is going to sell just because, Playdead's next game will sell just because it's Playdead's next game and the connotation of Inside and Limbo that it carries.
Yeah, and I mean, this is kind of just the inevitable reality of a growing industry. We've seen it in the music industry where you'll have like a indie boom of all these artists that are self-financed, and then they get progressively more popular, and over time and years progress, and then eventually the powers that be, the big money conglomerates, find a way to monetize that platform and make their value proposition bigger, and they link up with these independent people, and the nature of what it means to be independent starts to change over time. You'll have beloved artists and developers that were known to make these weird artsy things, and next thing you know, they're getting financed by these massive Chinese government funded companies. Like, this is not abnormal, and I've seen this happen in the music industry, so it was kind of inevitability to happen to the games industry. That it's what happens when your industry grows to a certain level, is just more people want to make more money off of it. And as an independent team sees more success, their projects are going to get more and more ambitious, which require more and more money, and the small little Kickstarters and the small little self-funding thing is just not going to cut it eventually. And just when they want to make that big jump, especially like a Playdead or something like that, to make something really ambitious, they need somebody behind them who is going to fund it. And fortunately or unfortunately, depending on what your perspective it is, I think like Epic is an example of the kind of team or company that you end up with behind you. So if it wasn't Epic, it was going to be somebody else, and let's just hope and give it a chance and see how it plays out. But again, I have faith because of the teams that they're buying, because they're choosing these more peculiar artsy style teams. It tells me that they're willing to fund things that are pushing the envelope a little bit more and a little less of a safe acquisition, which tells me that they're probably going to have a hands-off approach creatively.
Yeah, I don't see them interfering in any specific way.
No.
Yep. All right, so the next story is a quick story, which is unfortunately still connected to the situation that we're dealing with here in America and in the world. Sony working to lower speeds, which sounds like a horrible thing, but in this day and age, you got to understand what's going on with the world outside with the coronavirus. So PlayStation is working with ISPs to help lower speeds to manage the increased load due to the virus. Everyone's home, everyone's bandwidthing. Sony's not the first to do this. Netflix did the same thing. They said they're gonna lower the amount of 4K and HDs. YouTube, you can only really watch in standard definition for most things. And Microsoft, I think, even backdoor, or at least it leaked, it said that it's doing the same to trying to manage with everyone streaming and everyone downloading. They're just gonna lower the speeds. It's gonna take longer, but it's that way everyone has the same net coverage. I mean, I understand this. They released a big quote about how they're trying to be cognitive of what's going on out there and making sure that people who are stuck at home, quarantined at home, have the necessary tools to be able to still play their games, download their games, stream their games, whatever it may be.
Yeah, I mean, from a business level, I understand. Yeah, there's way more demand on the servers and the towers and stuff like that. So you're going to try to this is the same reason why like phone companies, for example, they throttle. Mm-hmm. And it's just to keep the experience even across all of their customer base. That makes sense. The kind of funny thing is, though, is when I read this story, I kind of started laughing because I was like, if there's one console right now that we know barely runs as is in terms of like a Wi-Fi speed level, it's the PS4. Like, the speeds were terrible to begin with.
Yeah,
so when they're talking about, like, in Europe and now the United States, that they're going to be working with ISPs to slow it down a little bit, you might experience slow download speeds. What does that mean to Sony? Because did you think that was fast before? Because slower than what was happening is damn near not downloading. Because I have all three consoles right now, all running off the exact same Wi-Fi router, same modem, same everything, and the speeds on the PS4 are just so much slower. And I have it on a wired connection. It's just terrible.
Yeah,
it's just the Wi-Fi card is just not that good on the console. Love the console, but there's a lot of issues in terms of the way they set up the Wi-Fi card. It's the slowest speeds of all of the three major consoles right now. So when they're talking about slowing it down even further, that just makes me worried because what is slower than this? I don't understand.
Yeah, no, I didn't think of it that way because before I play PlayStation, I do have to turn it on like an hour or two before to make sure what I want to play is updated, because downloading the updates take forever. I can only imagine with downloading a full game. Like, imagine if you're just trying to download Death Stranding or a huge, you gotta assume data-wise, like that is huge. Call of Duty's infamous for having just huge data. You probably take all day to download Call of Duty Modern Warfare right now, especially now when they added the Battle Royale mode. That is true, because I also have all the consoles, and my PC's a little bit beefy, so it is on Wi-Fi. I'd rather have it on wired. But it downloaded like Doom pretty quickly. But when I went to update a few games on my PS4, like I had it on all day yesterday because I was just updating things in the background, which was a little nuts.
Yeah, Sony has LimeWire speed. And so we're talking about bringing it down. I'm just like, oh god. Not to mention, like, because everybody's home because of the nature of the quarantine and everything, that means way more people are buying digital. I myself was like a hard physical purchaser. And even I was forced to go digital. And hey, I have to admit, like, it's convenient. Yeah, I kind of like it. Just being able to fire up Animal Crossing or Doom whenever I want. No disc needed, whatever. Yeah, it doesn't look nice on the shelf with the collection. But at this point, we're in quarantine. The world's falling apart. I don't really care about my shelf space right now. But yeah, like, with more and more people going digital, that means more and more people downloading games in its entirety, which, yes, is more server load on their end. But if that's going to be slowed and we're not just talking about updates now more people than ever are buying full entire games, which is not going to be so much of an issue like on the Switch, for example, that has like excellent compression, where most games are at the most 6 to 8 gigs. Like Animal Crossing is like 6 gigs. Like, it's insane. But like, yeah, if you want to download, like, imagine for the people who wanted to buy Doom Eternal on PS4, like, oh my god,
yeah,
I could only imagine.
You gotta think, like, this week we have Persona 5 Royal.
Yeah.
You have RE3, and then Final Fantasy is those are, you gotta assume those are big games. So especially Persona. I guess in this day and age you gotta preload it. If you're not, don't buy it on this day and expect to play it the same day and day. Luckily, you can have preloads. That's the only, I guess, silver lining in that option.
And the worst thing is, I would imagine, and I'm not alone in this, is that when you set something to download, you got a big download. It's like, all right, well, I'm going to go to work, and then when I come back, it'll be fine. Or I'm going to go to class, or I'm going to go to school. Or you kind of set it, and you forget it, and you go about your day. No one's going anywhere. Everybody's stuck home. So that means you set a download and it's like, this will be done in 36 hours while you sit in your living room and stare at your screen because you ain't going nowhere. Like, it's a nightmare.
Yeah, because then you don't want to even like watch Netflix, so then you're taking your bandwidth away, which means just slowing it down even more.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna trust them in the regard that I'll let it play out before I condemn them, and we'll see how the download speeds look. Lucky for me, I'm not planning on downloading any massive games on PS4 right now this minute. But again, yeah, when Final Fantasy comes out, as long as the economy hasn't collapsed fully, I plan on getting it, and that I'm gonna be playing on PS4 obviously because it's an exclusive, and so hopefully it's not too bad to the point where I can't even play it the day it releases. But we'll see.
Yeah.
Alright, so we got a weird story for you guys next, because we like to keep you guys updated on live action and movie adaptations of video games. We have the story that Netflix is making a live action Dragon's Lair movie. Now, the story is Netflix is planning to create a live action movie based on the 80s arcade game Dragon's Lair, and Ryan Reynolds is set to produce and star in the film. Now, a lot of people who don't play retro games won't know what the hell this game is, so I'll give you guys a little bit of background. This game came out around 83, if I'm not mistaken, and it was kind of like a Laserdisc game. So to give you guys an idea, imagine kind of like an 80s cartoon, and it's a kind of an interactive cartoon in the way that you make different decisions, and it's kind of like an early predecessor to like a QuickTime action game, what you'd see now. And it was a major hit in the arcades at the time. It was brutally hard, amazing cartoon animation there. And so they're doing an 80s adaptation, or live action adaptation. I don't understand necessarily the demand for this. Maybe they're honestly marketing it towards kind of like all the dads who spent their time in the arcade, and they're like, oh man, Dragon's Lair is coming back. And Ryan Reynolds is on fire right now, especially with his attachment to so many beloved properties now. So I think he's a natural fit for that. But do you have any attachment to Dragon's Lair, and is this something you're interested in?
So Dragon's Lair and I have always had this, like, I know what it is, I've seen it, I can point it out without having the title shown to me. I just never really played it that much. Like, I played it, and then I saw what it was, and this is, it's like I said, it's like you said, it's like early on, QuickTime event, the game, pretty much. And it's fine. I don't see where you create. Why not? I guess I get it. They're, Netflix is just handing money, and Netflix is producing so much. I just don't see where this fits in. Like, who wants to watch this? What's the story really going to be without just shot for shot being the game? Like, you can't build this huge lore. I just don't see what it, especially when you're thinking it's only a movie, not a series in any format. Ryan Reynolds is a fine pick. Again, he is, like you said, super hot right now off of Deadpool, off of Detective Pikachu, and his own Netflix movie that he just released a couple months ago. I just don't see what this is. Yeah, except picking at the retro bones in people, hopefully seeing that name. And I can kind of imagine it. I do see Ryan Reynolds wearing that stupid little helmet. And that I can see that. And again, maybe he's the one who pushed for this. You never know, because he's in that point where he can demand something. I just don't. I would love to be surprised. I don't really have an affection for that franchise. It doesn't matter too much to me. I'm not gonna pretend I'm the biggest fan, but I mean, I'll check it out. Why not?
Yeah, I mean, this could take a lot of forms. It could be a straight up adaptation of like whatever the lore is of that story, and have Ryan Reynolds play that main character and go through all these crazy traps and medieval, and maybe have that comedic approach. I feel like it would have the tone of like one of those old 80s Monty Python type movies. So yeah, I don't know exactly what that's gonna look like. What I hope it's not is kind of like one of those weird self-aware live action adaptations closer to like, those Looney Tunes movies where they had him like interacting with Brendan Fraser.
Yeah.
Like, I'm scared it's going to be like, what if we take the main character of Dragon's Lair and put him in downtown LA in the modern day? Oh, where am I? Oh, this is weird. I'm wearing a suit. I'm praying it's not that.
Oh, yeah, because like the arcade machine gets, like, shocked by electricity and he falls out of it or something.
Yes. Like, worst case scenario Sonic movie type stuff.
Yeah.
Like, because that's what I kind of see it playing out as. I'm like, they're going to try it again. Because I feel like we've seen that movie, like, how many times now? where they take like a weird, like Rocky and Bullwinkle when they tried to do the live action of that. Like I'm praying to God that's not what they're doing.
Yeah, I see now. Yeah, I see what you mean. Is it more Rocky and Bullwinkle, or is it more like Alvin and the Chipmunks, or ugh?
Oh God.
Ugh. Okay. Yeah. Well, we'll see. We'll see. They'll probably produce this pretty quick. Netflix is pretty quick in that.
Yeah, the only faith I have is that Netflix is willing to try out weird things, and Ryan Reynolds, as of right now, I mean, he's on a run right now. So I'll have faith. I'll give it a chance. I'll give it a watch when it comes out. I've played Dragon's Lair like once or twice in my life. And at that time, it was like an emulated version. So it's like I have zero attachment to the game itself. But maybe they could pull out something.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. So moving on to the next story, I guess sad story, but something most people have been seeing coming. GameStop to close more than 300 stores this year in 2020. GameStop has announced plans to close more than 300 stores in 2020, though the retailer was careful to note that this is part of an ongoing plan and not a response to recent trends. Pretty much, I guess, throwing light shade that this wasn't a response due to the corona and lost profits because of all the stores having to close. I can kind of attest to this. We've been hearing about this. I mean, I haven't worked at GameStop in over a year and a half now. And even then, we heard that they were closing like 600 stores. Then they closed 200 last year. And we knew the other stores were coming. So it's sad. It sucks for people in that position, the employees and stuff like that. I can't speak to the company as a whole because we know they've been doing some bad decisions and really just kind of tightening their own noose in this section, but it does suck for all those employees and people who are passionate, relying and supporting their family with this paycheck. 300 stores is a lot. Most GameStops have, I think, 10 employees, so you're looking at, roughly 3,000 people out of a job in this horrible, horrible time. This is the worst time to be let go from a job.
Yeah, and I mean, the unfortunate reality is that in this time, a lot of people are being furloughed to begin with, and these are, up to 3,000 employees who, when eventually this crisis ends, will not be returning to their job in any capacity, so that's unfortunate. But the reality is, this is something that has been due for quite a while. GameStop has a lot of issues, but one of the big issues that I think contributed to just them burning through money is their density issue, is the fact that they have too many stores too close to each other, competing with one another, and it's just the demand was not there for that. So you'll have like 3 GameStops in one town, and I mean that's cool for like people who want games. They'll have more than enough options, but the problem is there's just no sustainable business model in that. So yeah, that they were just burning through money. They had way too many stores, and so their response to that is, we're going to downsize. We're going to close a lot of the stores, which should, in their view, increase and drive sales because they'll be driving everybody to one GameStop in a region as opposed to having 60. So I mean, maybe they can make it work on the back end, but again, on the ground level, it's unfortunate for all the people who basically had to lose their jobs because they made bad decisions on a corporate level yet again.
Yeah, again, it's the proof's in the pudding. I mean, not to put my location out, where I live, and there's 2 GameStops. Currently, obviously, the one in the mall is closed, and the other one's doing that weird drive-by pickup. But even then, it's so annoying to have to bounce between the 2 GameStops. One doesn't have one thing, one doesn't have the other. I guess it makes sense to have one GameStop to have the game you want and the console you want, but it does suck. It does suck because there are some good people out there who are working at these stores. So our best of luck to them. Hopefully they land on their feet and survive, through this little nonsensical time we live in. Yeah,
and I mean, honestly, they say it's not tied to the whole, COVID-19 crisis that we're in right now. But I mean, I personally don't buy that. I think, honestly, it's something that had to happen and their hand was forced. And they're probably on a level, it's like, listen, we're burning through money. We're in a point where we can't operate and take in pretty much any money right now. When we eventually are in a position to reopen, if we're able to reopen, we cannot reopen with all these stores. So instead of having some staggered release because they don't have the capital to fund everything, they'll probably be like, now is the time we have to close everything. So I feel like in many ways their hands were forced.
Yeah, they weren't planning to announce this and do this so quick.
No way. Okay, so the last story we have is a pretty big one. It's Sony and Microsoft's next-gen launch being impacted by COVID-19 or the lack thereof. So Sony announced that it doesn't expect the game and network services part of its business to be impacted by the during the current fiscal year, which ends on March 31st of next year. With workforces diminished in China, though, and parts being scarce and the economy in shambles, next-gen may be delayed. But if it isn't, then consoles will be in really, really short supply. So, according to Sony right now, they're saying that they're not anticipating anything to be that impacted, and Microsoft's kind of reserving judgment while they watch the situation. To me, that was kind of just PR speak to kind of calm investors and not have everybody dump stock all of a sudden because they don't think that capital is going to be coming for quite a while. So it seems kind of like a minimizing game that we've seen the government play by Sony, if I had to read into the situation. But first off, the first question I would say is, do you think next gen's going to be delayed into 2021? And if not, what do you think it looks like when games launch, if they launch this year?
So initially, I would say yes. I would say I almost say that they need to be delayed. It would be the smart thing. I think it would be smart for Sony and Microsoft to both come to an agreement to launch a little bit later. I know there's a lot of money, advertisement, production. I know that there's having to sit on the consoles because you have to assume these consoles are going to production soon, as workforces in China and stuff like that are coming back, slowly, recovering from everything. Do I think they will delay it? No, because they're going to play a game of chicken, and one will wait for the other, and the other's going to wait for the other. So Microsoft wouldn't do it until Sony does it, and vice versa, in my opinion. If not, it's going to be a Wii situation where people are going to end up not getting the console they want, and they're going to get the console they just have. They're going to walk into their store or order on Amazon or Gamestops or whatever it is, Walmart, and they're going to be, oh, can I get a PlayStation 5? Oh, we don't have any, but we have 2 Xboxes left. All right, let me get, in a time of exclusivities really being low, all right, let me get the Xbox especially if the price is in close range. I think it's going to be more of that. It's going to be hunting down these consoles, and you're going to end up just accepting what you're going to get, and that's going to suck. Because if Microsoft made more consoles, and they're just more in the wild, and no one get a hand on PS5, then that sucks, because then most people are just going to default and be like, well, because the selling point, you got to think, people are going to be like, well, the Xbox is stronger anyway. Okay, why we even wait for it? I'll wait for, because God of War 2 and Spider-Man 2, these are not going to be launch titles, and Horizon 2 may be one, but most people are going to be like, well, I'll wait for those then. And that's going to mean a week launch for one or the other. You can't assume which one's going to do it first.
Yeah, I mean, it's really tricky because these are really like unprecedented times. We've never been in this position during a launch, and the closest analog I think we have in gaming, or at least a modern gaming landscape, is probably the 2008-2007 housing crash. And at that time, that kind of artificially lengthened the PS3, Xbox 360 generation and made it longer because they could not launch in that environment. Again, with the economy specifically in the States the shape that it was, they could not launch a new console, and people had way less money than ever before. And so now they're trying to launch a console, but they're also dealing with a worldwide pandemic and the way that affects the workforces abroad. So parts are going to be way less supply, so there's just going to be naturally less consoles, and also the people who are able to get their hands on consoles will have less money than ever. Just because the COVID-19 crisis may end, that the economic recovery time could be, way more long-lasting, which means if consuming is down, that means the consoles are going to not sell less, but people just have way less disposable income because everybody's going to be rebounding from months of not working. So it's kind of like a disastrous situation all around. And again, I don't necessarily look at their budget, so I'm not going to tell them what their business strategy should be. But I would say, judging by looking at all the factors at play, they'd be kind of stupid to launch this year. Just because they need to give people the chance to get back to work, get that disposable income built up again, be back to some semblance of normalcy, and be able to hit that supply and demand equilibrium. That's a perfect space to be, where you don't want too many consoles on shelves, but you don't want necessarily a Wii situation. Now, the Wii situation was strange because, again, that was artificial scarcity.
Yeah.
Nintendo made that situation. You basically have to take the PS4 Pro situation, where there was just way too little consoles because they didn't anticipate the demand, and so their supply didn't meet it. Now, just multiply that tenfold, where like the supply is screwed up and the demand, we can't even anticipate the demand right now because people are in such perilous, weird economic times. So it's just such a hard way. They have no precedence to build this on. They've never seen this situation before. So it's hard to project and predict what the industry is going to look like in 6 months, let alone a year. So do I think they'll launch this year? I think there's a strong chance they might do it, but I don't see an economic reality where they can. I think they have to punt it to maybe a March 2021 and emulate kind of like the Switch launch or the PS2 launch.
Yeah.
Early next year, to give people the chance to bounce back and to give the workforce a chance to really meet the demand that could be there at that time.
Yeah, that'd be the smart thing to do. Again, you got to realize the consoles are going to be... Again, we don't have a price and we don't have an exact date. We're estimating that both consoles are minimum $500. That's a lot, especially for the people that are going to buy both. That's $1,000 for just the system. You're not including...
I was planning on buying both.
Yeah, so was I. Now it might be like I don't know.
I might have to choose one.
Yeah, I might have to choose one. I might maybe get the opposite of someone else or whatever it is, because it's not just It's not just that, and I'm not including taxes and stuff like that. But you most likely want to buy a spare control. You want to buy a game or two, which, assuming game prices go up, are going to be like $70 a game. So you're looking at a hefty price. You're looking at probably almost $700 to $800, especially considering whatever other little warranties and controllers and accessories they can come out with. Again, nobody planned the PlayStation 4 camera, and everybody wanted that at launch, and that was another $60 or something like that. So it's a lot of money you're gonna expect people to just have when people don't even have money right now for rent for the next couple of months. They don't have money for bills and all this other stuff. Gaming is an expensive hobby, so now it's gonna get to the point where people have to choose. And if you make that choice easier for them by delaying your system for a later time, when people have more disposable income, when they've recovered a little bit, then you're better off, and it just looks better, I guess, PR wise. Again, business wise, don't know what that looks like behind the door, sitting on your consoles for 3-4 months. But again, you do want to avoid not having your system out there, because what's the point of launching if you only make a couple thousand or a couple tens of thousand, and that's it. Once they're sold out, you have an indefinite date. That's it was very, Switch launch, I guess, is the closest when you had that, when people were trying to find Switches. I mean, look, people are trying to find Switches now, and they can't find Switches during this time. And that's a console that's been out for, 3 years now? 2 years?
Pretty much, yeah, 2017.
2017. That's a 3-year-old console, and now, I mean, I had a family member message us last night asking, is it discontinued? Because they're not really in them. I'm like, it's not discontinued. It's people bought them all. You don't want the same thing happening when you're launching a brand new tech. You want people to be able to get their hands on it and not hunt it down. Because you got to think, by this fall, this whole scare is not going to be over. People are not going to be wanting to go out as much. Who knows the limitations of stores and retail stores specifically. A thing like GameStop or Walmart, when you want people to go hands-on, people are not going to want to go hands-on with these systems.
They're lasting consequences of this.
Yeah, in the display case. So it's like, if people can't get in touch with it and stuff like that, are they going to even be worried? Are they going to just wait and not sell? Because why even launch in October, November? Because both companies are still both saying holiday or late 2020, and they're not going to launch in December. It just doesn't make sense then. If people aren't going to buy it till March anyway, make it a bigger launch then. Have time to polish those, titles. Tell your first party developers who have these games at launch, hey, look, you're going to get an extra 2 months. Tighten it up. Make this game the way it needs to be. And that way it's a little bit more accessible for everyone, and it's an even playing field, because that sucks for now. People are just, it's going to be first come, first serve. At a launch, I just can't get a system.
Yeah, and not to mention, I think one big factor a lot of people overlook is the standing of these two companies walking into this next gen, and the reality of it, keeping it completely honest, is we're not talking about companies on equal footing, to be honest. Microsoft pretty definitively lost this gen because of a myriad of situations, and they really, I have to commend them. They really got it together late in the gen, and they figured things out, and I got to give them a lot of credit for that. And I really love my Xbox One S, and I love Game Pass, and I love the real customer-friendly decisions they've made late in the gen. But it is really in their vested interest to kind of clean slate and launch this next generation and get this going and get that Xbox Series X going and have the whole new PR spin without all the baggage of the original Xbox One launch. Just a clean slate again.
Mm-hmm.
PS4 is not walking into that same reality. The reality is, not only has PS4 done incredibly well and is still moving units, but they still have brand new games coming out this year. So the reality is, I feel like Xbox One's next gen console, the Series X, is kind of actually overdue at this point.
Mm-hmm.
PS5, I feel like in many ways is being rushed in the way that they don't need to walk into next gen. The fact that they're coming straight up to head with a brand new PS4 major AAA exclusive right into the PS5 launch is pretty close. Sometimes when you go into next gen launch like the Xbox, you actually experience a little bit of a couple month lull where there's not that much coming out because a lot of developers are developing for the next generation of consoles. Xbox is in that lull, PS4 is not in that lull at all. So I feel like PS4 doesn't stand that much to lose by punting it off into 2021. It still makes their economic reality look clean. There'll be a nice, consistent, not to mention they probably have stuff that are unannounced. So they could have one more game for the fall, for example, and still have a nice, steady stream of new content for the PlayStation, even if they do punt it to 2021. Where if Xbox punts it to 2021, we're talking about a year at this point of pretty much nothing. Because if Halo Infinite doesn't come out until the next gen launch, that means Halo Infinite for March. Gears 5 launch, so nothing new for Gears is going to come out other than those little spin-offs that they have. Ori is out. There's no other major exclusives on the slate right now. I don't know if their new teams are coming. I don't know where Hellblade is. So we're talking about a whole nother year of nothing coming from Xbox. That looks a lot worse for them. So it's in Xbox's best interest to get it out this fall, but I can't say it's necessarily the same for PS5, which means, like, will they have kind of a divergent release schedule where Xbox feels like they have to drop this fall, they drop this fall, they deal with the console scarcity issues maybe, or maybe they won't deal with it because PlayStation is not launching, so that maybe they give Xbox the leg up and then PS5 launches. That would be really unprecedented. It'd be very strange. We'd never see that before. But it is a possibility I think people should consider.
Yeah, that's very true. I didn't even think of it in that aspect because Sony still has... I mean, Final Fantasy VII is a timed exclusive on PS4. So you have that as an exclusive. You still have The Last of Us 2, which is going to be a just titan to deal against. And then a month later, you have Ghost of Tsushima. So this brings us all the way through June, right? I think June is when Ghost of Tsushima comes out. July and all this time you have smaller titles if any, and you focus on your third party, and most of these third party games are going to be releasing on PS4 as well. And so why even worry? I didn't think about that aspect that Sony doesn't need to go right now.
Not at all.
Xbox does have more to lose by not coming out. I never thought of it in that aspect. In that aspect, I'd love it for them to be delayed too. It'd be easier for people who want to purchase both systems. It'd be a whole lot easier to get them 4 or 5 months apart than it is getting them. I think the Xbox One and the PS4 launched like 2 weeks apart or even 1 week apart, which was insane. It was insane. I couldn't get an Xbox One at launch, not because I couldn't find it. It's because I just spent the money on a PS4. Wow, that's
them spacing it out might be in their best interest, even though it's something they've never done before. Even though, they have, because the PS3 did launch, like a year after the 360?
Yeah, a whole year.
So, again, PlayStation's done it before, and they could possibly do it again. And it's just a reality to sum it all up is that the Xbox One, as much as I love it, and again, this is no fanboy stuff, I love the Xbox One, it in many ways is kind of a remnant of a bygone era and kind of a dead console at this point. It's sold what it's going to sell, and they're going to just have to move on from there.
Yeah.
The PS4, they would have to essentially snuff it out and just launch they kind of have to kill their own console to launch the next one, because the momentum is just so strong in the PS4 because of just years and years of consistent releases, and it's still selling so consistently. Yeah, they'd have to kill it off to launch the PS5, where Xbox is kind of rushing to get that next gen out because they want to be in the advantageous position, and that could possibly do it, where you'd see them on more even playing field, where it's like if you give Xbox a couple months ahead, the part scarcity might not be as bad. They'll have a couple months of sales that might make up for the fact of the lack of the exclusives, and then once PS5 comes out with all that momentum built from the PS4, we'll might be able to see a real competition finally, where they're both in good positions. That'll give Xbox more time to give their the initiative and all their different teams time to release new games. So I mean, we'll see how it plays out, but the whole idea that it's like next gen has to be punted into 2021 for both companies, I think is not necessarily the case when you look at the reality of where they're walking into.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good way to look at it. All right, so we're going to go into our loose topic of the week. We usually end off the week with a little topic of discussion. And this one, we're taking a look back at the PlayStation Vita, the Vita retrospective, as you referred to it as, pretty much. So what's you can start first. What's your relationship with the PlayStation Vita?
Yeah, so, one thing is, the reason I wanted to do this subject is, now that we're moving on to all this next-gen talk, and the PS4 and the Xbox One are still technically active consoles, the one thing we can definitively say is that the kind of lifespan of the Vita is for the most part done, especially with us playing Twin Breaker. That's kind of the last thing that we're probably going to play on this console, realistically. So I think it's finally the point where we can kind of say our RIPs and just speak about the life cycle of the Vita. So I can say that I was a late adopter to the Vita. You had it maybe a year and a half before I did, I believe. I don't know how close to the launch you got it, but I picked it up, I think, in 2014, I think, if I'm not mistaken. And one of the first games I jumped into was Persona Golden, and that kind of put it on a different level for me. It was a different experience. I had never played anything mobilely like that before. I admittedly wasn't the biggest fan of the 3DS. At the time, it just didn't really have that many titles that interested me, which was nuts because I was such a big fan of the original DS. And so finally having a console that was a successor to one of my favorite handhelds of all time, the PSP, was just revolutionary in playing those kind of mobile experience, especially once you factor in games like Soul Sacrifice, eventually Freedom Wars, Killzone Mercenaries. Like, these were, especially at the time, like console level quality experiences, almost equivalent to what the PS3 maybe at points, but especially, high level PS2 stuff on the go was just insane. And now looking back at that, especially now that we have the Switch, it seems kind of like silly, but at the time, like, that, having a full-blown shooter like Killzone on the go was incredible. And having that high level OLED screen, the great form factor, 2 joysticks, like, this was an amazing console that I feel like was plagued with a lot of the same issues that the Dreamcast was plagued with, which it was one of the most powerful pieces of hardware on the market for what it was trying to do, but eventually software support and the company behind it and the lack of investment on the company behind it was its downfall, unfortunately. And so ultimately, Nintendo just, with consistency and hit after hit after hit after hit, despite the fact that they were just super underpowered compared to it, managed to snuff it out, unfortunately. And Sony just wasn't willing to invest. After, Uncharted Golden Abyss, what major Sony game did you get on the Vita? There was not that many, unfortunately. A lot of the stuff was canceled. There was supposed to be a BioShock on Vita. They didn't end up bringing that to fruition. I think there was at one point supposed to be a Saints Row. That didn't come. And thing after thing after thing started falling through, and Sony wasn't really there to really support it in the way it needed to be. And so, unfortunately, a really powerful piece of hardware kind of fell by the wayside and was abandoned by the last person I expected to be abandoned by, which was Sony themselves. And thank goodness for Japan and Japanese devs, like NIS, for example, who were willing to put the time and effort into making this console into something. And games like Danganronpa, for example, and Akiba's Trip and stuff like that really flourished on this console, and since have seen success on the Switch. but we have to give it its credit that to Japan for really doubling down on this console because they did see the returns over there. If people were buying Vita games in Japan. So yeah, that's kind of my experience with them.
Yeah, so mine. So I remember when the Vita launched. It launched February. Well, in America, it launched in February 2012. And I remember it coming out, and I wasn't really sure what it was because it was super expensive to me at the time. I was, a little bit out of high school, was working, trying to get my first car and stuff like that. So for me to drop that much on a handheld, I just could not justify it. I ended up getting it that year, Black Friday. There was an Assassin's Creed bundle, I believe, that came out. So I have the original. I have two Vita. I have two Vitas now, but I have the original, the fat Vita with the OLED screen, the white one, which was the Assassin's Creed bundle. And I remember initially just loving it. I was like, "Oh, this is fantastic!" But immediately I was like, "Why do you have two terrible cameras on this? Why even have a camera in general?" But I'm assuming they took that from going head to head with smartphones. They were going head to head with the Nintendo DS, or it was 3DS at the time, which was the main competitor. So I was like, why are you trying not to do just good games? You had that weird stuff where you had like rappers who had it were tweeting and stuff like that from the Vita's menus and stuff like that. And
cards.
Yeah, it was so
PlayStation Vita?
Yeah, it was so weird. I was like, there's so many things that I was like, why did you do? There's so many things they could have done to help alleviate the price. I understand why they went with like proprietary memory cards to avoid the jailbreaking scene. They didn't want a repeat of the PSP. We know that.
Which I want to get into later.
Yeah, because the proprietary memory cards in the Vita. Even now, I was curious before the show. I went to go look. The biggest card they did was a 64 gig, and that thing runs like $120 right now.
And it fails all the time.
And it fails constantly. Most people recommend.
Mine is dying right now.
Yeah, so I have in my original Vita, I have a 32 gig, which has worked for me as long as I've had the Vita. In my Vita Slim or whatever, my orange Vita, which is the 2000 model, it has like a 4 gig, which only holds a game. I think it has Twin Breaker and One Piece Pirate Warriors 3, and that's all that memory card. Well, I went to go put Persona 3, and it told me no. And it's just, the console was a hit in so many ways, but it just doesn't seem like the same people who were developing like the PS4 and all these kind of good methods weren't hands-on with the Vita. They were doing responsive. They're like, well, other systems and phones have, because this is the time where mobile phones were really popping, and everyone was playing Angry Birds and all these dumb things on their phones, so they wanted to compete with it. That's why you had the Vita model with the 3G, but it had to be through AT&T. But you couldn't use that 3G to play video games or something stupid like that. It was only to use Facebook and Twitter and the internet search. So a lot of these just decisions they were making. The menu is still disgusting. I don't like that they look like those little Hershey drop candies.
Yeah, little M&Ms.
The little M&M thing. I don't understand why that is that. I'll give it to it. Games download pretty fast on it. I don't know I don't know if it's because of the size of that. Because mostly everything I play now on Vita is digital. They download pretty quick. But there's no reason to, like, I'm holding mine right now. There's no reason that it really needed to be touchscreen. And there's definitely no reason to have a back touchscreen. This is the only device I've ever seen with a back touchscreen. And it's the only time I remember using it was in Little Deviants.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's like the only game I could
Which was a launch title, which was terrible. Again,
maybe Tearaway? I don't know.
Maybe Tearaway had a situation with that as well. But, the camera quality is terrible, even considering the time. 2012, the iPhone, I don't know what iPhone was out at the time, 4 or 5, had a way superior camera. And I had the same issue with the Nintendo 3DS, because I do enjoy my Vita more than I did my DS, because the DS cameras, those are terrible. Those are absolutely terrible. I don't even know why they're on there. So why make a console in response to that instead of amplifying what you did right with the PSP? And that was, party support, third party and first party, and smaller teams, because you had smaller teams work on good IPs like Jak and Daxter, and they did the Daxter spin-off, and you had these Ratchet and Clank games that were living on there. You had, a whole Kingdom Hearts game, Birth by Sleep, which is one of the best Kingdom Hearts games, in my opinion.
I agree.
That was exclusive to the PSP. and they didn't come out till way later on consoles and stuff like that. Those were full-fledged games. And, you know, Crisis Core was another one, which that is, you know, it's stranded on PSP. Oh, no, yeah, Crisis Core was PSP. So why not go off that success? And I think that's why I ended up buying a Vita, thinking, well, when they do the next quote-unquote Crisis Core, or when they do the next Kingdom Hearts, I'll have my Vita set and ready to go. And it never came. The support never came. I remember playing Uncharted Golden Abyss, and I was like, this is fine, but I was like, it felt like they reused a lot of assets from Uncharted like 1 and 2. It even looked like 1. I know it was a prequel and stuff like that, but besides that, you know, Killzone looked great, but it looked too much like Killzone Shadowfall. And then I played the Call of Duty, which was hot trash.
Classified? Oh my god.
Yeah, Black Ops.
Terrible.
Which I think that launched around the time Black Ops 2, so I was like, cool, Black Ops 2 was so good. Initially, you're thinking, the way they were advertising the Vita, they're like, console on the go. I was like, cool, Black Ops 2 on the go, at least I'm going to play some zombies with some computers and get the Easter eggs and stuff. No. You got, it looked like reused assets from Black Ops 1. So it looked like they just dumped all these old reused assets and teams that were just starting and testing on a handheld that was so powerful. And that reflects in their games.
Yeah, I mean, again, I got a lot of love for this company. For this console. It's not easy to launch a double SKU kind of offering. What I mean is that to have that kind of home console, you know, full-fledged console and the kind of handheld offering on the side is not an easy thing to do. Nintendo's shown their ability to do it, and they're seeing even more success when they fused both of them with the Switch. But the idea that Sony failed with the PSP is a misnomer. A lot of people like to say, oh, why did they do the Vita, considering the PSP didn't even do that good and it was only good for the homebrew scene. That's actually not really that true, because, I mean, they did move 80 million units of the PSP ultimately. 80 to 82 million. You can check it. Which is, I mean, nothing to, you know, scoff at. That's a good amount of units. So it made sense why they went for a second attempt. But the problem is, I feel like, again, they didn't really look at the PSP and what made it successful and kind of allow that to be. So, yes, I understand there was an enormous amount of piracy going on the PSP. And I don't expect Sony necessarily to sit there and condone that. But to go to such extents where, like, I mean, you can't do anything on that thing. Let alone even putting an MP4 on it was a nightmare. I remember on the PSP, you hooked that up with a USB cord right into it, drag and drop, copy paste right onto the PSP. There you go. You're watching a movie, or you're watching a video, or you're watching a YouTube video, or whatever you wanted to do, which was used for a myriad of different reasons that we won't get into. But with the PSP, I remember you need to download this specific proprietary app to connect it to the PC, and you have to like upload it onto the app, which then transfers it to the Vita, and then from that point you do all that. You spend 30-something minutes to get this video onto your Vita, just for it to say, hey, that's incompatible, it's corrupted. And I'm just like sitting there like, why'd you do all this? Not to mention, I just spent 100 and something now on a memory card that's now failing on it. And it's just a tremendously amazing console that for some reason Sony could not get out of their way. They kept kicking themselves in the butt through this thing. And it's like they almost wanted to fail. And it's like when you're going against a juggernaut like Nintendo in the handheld space, who they've dominated for that at that point generations, going back to the Game Boy. But you can go back into the Game & Watch. Like, they beat out people for a minute in the handheld space. So you need to come with all your guns loaded, ready to go, all first party. There needs to be a, you know, full-blown God of War onto there, Uncharted. You need everything, all hands on deck. There needed to be a full-blown of like maybe a down-resed version of Last of Us on that. Like, I'm being dead serious. Like, they needed to be on there in the same way Nintendo's willing to do it. You get a Mario experience on the go. Here's a Mario version on your console. Oh yeah, Mario 64, that full-blown experience. Here you go on a handheld. You could play that. But I mean, for some reason, Sony just didn't have the investment, and I don't blame the third parties for not investing the same way, because if the first party's not invested, why am I, as Ubisoft or Activision, gonna put in resources that the main developers won't? You know what I mean? Like if Sony's not putting their IP onto there, why am I going to put a whole bunch of work into putting my IP? Because they saw the numbers, they saw the writing on the board. Like, this wasn't going to hit in the same way because for some reason Sony attention lied elsewhere, and they kind of gave up relatively early. I mean, the last major Sony game was back in 2014, 2015 at the latest.
I think so, yeah.
That's what, like 2-3 years into the life cycle they gave up. Like that, we hadn't seen anything like that since Sega with the Saturn. They came out with that, and then they came out with the Dreamcast, and they're like, oh, that's not working, port it all. And so, yeah, if the main developers are not gonna, and the publishing arm is not gonna dedicate themselves to the handheld, then third parties are just gonna follow suit. They're gonna put their resources to where there's returns, and there cannot be returns if all hands are not on deck from a developing standpoint. So, RIP to the Vita, got a lot of love for it. It's so much potential in that machine, but unfortunately the burden had to be held by people who catered to only niche markets. Ultimately the burden fell onto Japanese devs doing amazing fun RPGs, but again, that there's just not enough demand for those type of games to really support a full handheld SKU for a full console lifecycle. It's just impossible. So the moment that Sony stopped investing on it, it was kind of, I wouldn't say the nail in the coffin, but it was a downward spiral from that point. And I think that spiral was elongated by the Japanese dev scene, and I, again, got nothing but love for them. To shout out to them. I'm super thankful that they did that, and they were able to extend the life of this console longer. But there's no way that they could save it, unfortunately. And unfortunately, because of Sony's lack of investment and it ultimately not doing too well, the Switch already outsold it in 3 years. That pretty much guarantees that for the foreseeable future, it's going to be a long time before you see another dedicated handheld, if ever, from Sony. Because, again, they misread the situation. They misread what was popular about the PSP and then released the Vita and made a whole bunch of unnecessary mistakes. And they seem to misread the reception of the Vita and concluded, oh, so there's no demand for a handheld. It's like, no, there's no demand for your handheld because you're not putting forth the effort into making it successful. In the same way, like, I mean, look at the Switch. There's demand for a handheld.
Yeah.
You just have to do it right. And it seems that Sony misread that, just like they misread crossplay, just like they misread a whole bunch of things. And so, unfortunately, the likelihood that we get, like, a PSP 3 or a PS Vita 2 or whatever is, slim to none at this point, which I would love that, but it doesn't seem like it's on the horizon anytime soon. No pun intended.
Yeah, I don't think it would. I would be like shocked. I would be completely shocked to even see that they announced it, like a Vita 2 or whatever they would call the next handheld. And I know they came out and officially confirmed that they're not working on it right now. Again, there could be PR talk. I really don't believe they're working on it right now. They can't get things right in their home consoles, so I can only even think they can't get things correct on their handheld consoles. They figured so many things right with the Vita. Power-wise, adding the two dual sticks is good. The buttons seem fine. And then they had backwards compatibility with digital PSP games and PS1 classics. Those are two things you can't get on a PS4. You can't get PS1 classics on a PS4, which it's 2020 and we cannot play PS1 classics on a PS4, which is ridiculous. So it's like you figured some things out and you don't figure out the rest. Which is why as soon as those rumors came out that the PS5 was going to be complete backwards with PS Vita, PSP, PS1, 2, I didn't believe it at all. Because Sony not smart. It's not smart enough. But they're not wise enough to notice that's what they need. So it's really their shortcomings that we see live on in their consoles, which is terrible. And they can't really blame it anymore. They were saying, oh, it's the handheld market, the mobile market, iPhones and Androids are killing it, because the Switch launched the Switch Lite, which is a complete handheld version, and that sold like crazy. That was hard to find in stores. People wanted it. You and I were tempted to get it. If it wasn't for the fact that the world ended and the hardware issues, Joy-Con drift and stuff like that is a bigger issue on that. For now, you just replace your Joy-Cons on your new Switch and you're fine. But these aren't things I ever had worry about my Vita. So both of my Vitas still, again, it's been a while since I've launched my original Model 1. I was looking for it before the show and I couldn't find it. So we'll see when I launch that what works and what doesn't work anymore. But this model now is just like, I like it. It's so snug and fits nice in my hand. I was playing Twin Breaker. Twin Breaker, I feel like just feels better on that kind of game. And like you said, the Japanese role-playing games. I mean, this is where I experienced Persona 4. You know, this is the first time that's my first experience with the Persona game was on my Vita. Then I went back and played 3, and then Dancing, and that's where I experienced the first 2 Danganronpa games. Yeah. So these are some of my games that I hold very dear to me now, and have a lot to be thankful for. And it's on a console that will most likely most people have never heard of. You know, if I ask my dad what's a Nintendo, he kind of realized what it is. He kind of knows what a Switch is just by looking at it. If I showed him my Vita, he would have no idea what he's looking at. He'd probably think I got a new phone because just look at it. And that sucks because there's so much potential, and I believed in it. I know I bought it a little late, but I didn't buy it, you know, used. I did buy a new one, through Amazon at the time. And I always thought that they were going to redo it. And when they announced that they were doing that new model, the slim model, the 2000 model, I was like, it's time for them to relaunch it like it's a brand new system. Admit the shortcomings. Here's like the new system, cheaper, and here's a slew of games. Here's more backwards compatibility. I'm sure the Vita could run certain PS2 games if they wanted it to.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, the PSP ran some PS2 games. So.
Exactly. So, you know, the fault is no one but them. They can't blame the fault on anyone else except themselves for not supporting it the right way, not listening to what the consumers wanted. We didn't want another phone to do everything. It's nice that it can play music to an extent. It's nice that it can play videos, again, to an extent if you do the workarounds and all that nonsense. But you left it to die so quick. And if you didn't believe in it, no one else was going to believe in it.
Yeah, and I guess maybe the one silver lining we could have, call me an optimist if you will, but maybe it has kind of the legacy and tale similar, again, to the Dreamcast. I always compare it to the Dreamcast in the way that it was an incredibly powerful system that didn't get invested in the way it should have been. And unfortunately it failed, and then they took a lot of the successful pieces of software from it, ported it to a different console. Again, their life cycles are very similar. And then fast forward a whole bunch of years, there's almost kind of like a cult following for it. And does that translate into software sales? Necessarily, I don't know. But who knows? Maybe 10 years from now, there's kind of a Vita love resurgence where it's like, hey, you remember that console? That thing was actually pretty cool, wasn't it? It was actually pretty strong. There was actually some real good hits on there. And you'll start seeing like Vita's like collections and stuff like that. I'm hoping for that. And that's the kind of best we can hope for at this point, is that maybe people appreciate it down the line when people look back on this generation and say, you know, we really misunderstood that console. And the crazy thing is, if people are starting to look back on the previous gen and start showing love for the Wii U, like I'm seeing that. So if I'm seeing some love retroactively for the Wii U, people being like, hey, the console itself was kind of a hunk of crap, but there was some real good games on there. I feel like there's hope for the Vita, and I just hope and pray that maybe Sony sees that finally, after the nails in the coffin and it's 6 feet under and it's decomposing. People are like, hey, I actually kind of like that guy, and let's put a little love into it. Because I swear, not only did Sony not invest in it, they kind of act like it's never happened, which is insane to me. Like, if Nintendo can acknowledge the Virtual Boy, I don't know why they treat Vita like this. It's insane to me.
Yeah.
But, yeah, that's the best we can hope for at this point, is that it kind of has, like, the tale of a Dreamcast in the way that people well regard it and gets a cult following, you know, years down the line.
I can only hope so, because it is such a good system. It's something
it deserves it.
Yeah, it does deserve it. It's such a good system, not even just looking power-wise, but the way it just worked well. The games that were made well on it are really good games. So it just sucks that, you know, it suffered because they didn't want to take care of it the right way. And I do hope it does have a slow resurgence elsewhere. You know, not a home brewing scene. I don't mean that. I don't mind buying my games digital. But the thing is, I can't go all digital if I don't have memory cards for it. And the memory cards was a big issue.
They gotta figure something out for that,
yeah. Yeah, I don't know what the answer is to that, because, you know, it's, you know, the Vita's been officially discontinued March 2019, so it's been a year as of recording. And, we did just get Twin Breaker out, and there's still other little smaller titles and indie games that come to it. But at some point, the memory cards are going to stop, and, I still have my Dreamcast, and we still play things on our Dreamcast that work well. But it's because the hardware fits. I don't want my Vita to end up just being a shelf decoration because I can't get it to run. And that's a legit concern of mine.
Yeah, me too. My memory card's failing. I was playing Twin Breaker yesterday, and this is an issue I bumped into multiple times, where I'll fire up my Vita and it says that my memory card like I don't know if you've ever dropped your Vita, but sometimes it can dislodge the memory card and disconnect it, and so you have to restart your consoles for it to read again. But it started doing that where there was no drop, there was no nothing. It's it's not reading all of my digital games. It's only showing games that I have physically that I installed. So I would format the memory card, or I'd take it out, reinstall it back in, and it's not reading stuff, and I had to re-download Twin Breaker. But luckily my saves were intact still. But I'm oh boy, it's failing. And I looked online, and apparently, a lot of 64 gig Vita memory cards fail a lot. So it looks like I'm on that part of the life cycle where it's on the latter half of my memory card, which concerns me because there's no real option for replacing it. Because you can buy them online, but the reality is economics are really effed up right now. We're about to go into another console cycle, so I can't put money into a Switch, put money into a PS4, put money into a PS5, put money into my Xbox and now my Series X eventually, and also retro collect, and on top of that, buy a memory card for a console that's getting little to no future support, and I pretty much have every Vita game that I'm particularly that interested in. It's just no justifying that, so I have real severe concerns about that. Not to mention, this is not an issue I ever considered. I was never getting ready to be hey, when my memory card dies, I'll have this one lined up. I never anticipated that. I think I might have a 4 gig somewhere, so there might be hope yet. But it's unfortunate, but again, RIP the Vita. Got love for you. One of my favorite handhelds of all time.
Yeah, same here. It's just a beautiful handheld, and I love having it and spending this weekend playing different things on it. Well, not different things, I guess. Again, just One Piece and Twin Breaker. It just sucks. It feels bad. But we're Vita fans till the day it died, and even now it's still going on, and we love it and support it. But it is
Vita Island for life.
Yeah, Vita Island for life. Bring it back.
All right, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed that loose topic. We're going to be doing this for other consoles as their life cycles come to an end. Next week, I believe we'll be doing Xbox, since we have the formal Series X announcement and we've seen what the console has to offer. And for the most part, all the exclusive Xbox One games are out. Yep. So I think we can finally do that, and then we'll do PS4 once the PS5 shows us more information, and maybe Ghost of Tsushima's out and PS4's life cycle starts to dwindle down and come to an end. And hope you guys enjoyed that. So this is another episode in the bag. This is what, episode 9? I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, episode 9. Yeah, episode 9.
Yeah, we're coming up to the Big 10. It's pretty crazy.
Yep.
And till next time, we'll be here back next Sunday. This was Jabro, and I'm with
Steve.
And this is the NeoVintage Podcast. Bye.
Take care.